Welcome, welcome. So it is the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. We have a fair bit to cover, but we also made sure to leave some time at the end for questions like always. I suspect we will have a lot of questions and it might turn into a little bit of a group interview / discussion. But we've got most of our bases covered and a really good place to start. So just to make sure that everyone who's joining us now is in the right room. And for those watching afterwards, we do have this, we're recording this and it will be available on the Labs portal in the on-demand section in about a week's time or so. So this is the cold outreach session for Sales Academy to make sure you're in the right Zoom meeting, not missing anything else. For those of you who are joining us that are not part of the WeWork community, to say yet, this series is brought to you by WeWork Labs. WeWork Labs is WeWork's entrepreneurial support platform for startup and small business members. We run educational series like this, as well as connect you with experts from across the globe and give you access to over $400,000 worth of perks. And it's growing every day, all for free as a WeWork member. It's included in your membership. So more information about WeWork Labs will be included in any follow-up emails if you're not already a WeWork member. And if you are a WeWork member and you haven't opted into the Labs platform and the support it offers yet, there'll be links to make sure that you're not missing out on that either. Before I introduce our speaker and topic and we get into everything, a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure to ask your questions in the Q&A box. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a little icon that says Q&A. Pop your questions in there throughout the session, and then we'll answer them at the end of the session so that we can make sure we get through everything, but that way they don't get buried, because if you put them in the discussion box in the chat, they can get buried and we can't guarantee that we'll see them and get to them. So with that being said, I'll intro the session and hand it over to Ed to get into a little bit of his background in relationship with this topic. It's one that has been a long time coming, and a lot of questions over the last few weeks have come up about cold calling and cold outreach. As we've been talking about know your customer and prospecting, everything is kind of leading up to this point. This is the pointy end of sales. You can't really develop new customers without going out and doing some cold outreach of some sort. So we know it's something that people have a lot of trepidation and are frankly scared of. So we're going to address that elephant in the room, and then we'll get into some of the ways that you can not just push past the fear and the anxiety, but actually really level up your skills and become really good at cold outreach. So with that, I will hand over to Ed to actually introduce himself and give a little bit of backstory on his relationship with this topic.
Thank you, Ren. And I'll start by saying thanks for having me here today. I think this is it's a pretty exciting topic. I think it is a little bit taboo, and there obviously is trepidation around approaching customers or approaching prospects for the first time. So something that I myself have been pretty involved with for probably the past 10 years in a variety of different capacities. From a background perspective, my background in sales started in Sydney, sort of in a very consultative, high spec world. And then when I moved to New York about 6 years ago, I joined an inside sales team that was selling market research on Wall Street. So it was very much a high velocity, a significant amount of outbound activity. From there, I actually moved into running a national sales team at that same company. So really developing the right KPIs, developing the right cadence, and then transitioned to WeWork now into the enterprise sales team, which does involve a lot of cold outreach and education, maybe less so cold calling at the moment. Just since office space isn't something you can sort of quickly sell someone on the phone unless it is the right place, right time. But I'm now running the national enterprise sales team and account management team here, who are responsible for chasing the largest global prospects. So a lot of that is around careful and deliberate prospecting and outbound activity, and really demonstrating value in that particular customer engagement. So yeah, very, very happy to be here.
Fantastic. I will go ahead and keep my camera off just for this session, but I'll give everyone a rundown of approximately what we're going to be covering over the next 30 to 40 minutes. And just a reminder, pop your questions in the Q&A box, because I can already sense that there will be many. So a little bit of what we're going to go over today, or what Ed's going to cover, is why is cold outreach important? So it's easy enough, especially for something that a lot of people are scared of, to just say it's too scary, not going to deal with it, and there's other ways to get new clients. So why even bother? Why is it important? And then we will address hesitancy, where it comes from, and how to overcome it, just from a high level. And then that will lead into the different kind of channels that you can think about when you're planning your cold outreach strategy, and go over some pros and cons of those, as well as top 4 cold outreach mistakes and a little bit of how to avoid them. I can almost guarantee that we could make that list a lot longer and turn that into a whole Q&A section. Then we'll transition to how to really level up from not bad to wow. And then we'll suggest a couple of resources that are a good place to follow on from this session to keep going with the basics and the tips and tricks that we cover. So with that.
Why is cold outreach important?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then we will also sort of dive into some of the challenges that you might face, you know, if you don't pursue this as sort of a channel. But ultimately, you know, it's about reaching the right prospects, and it's something that most likely your competitors will be doing. So you'll immediately be on the back foot if it's not something that you're pursuing. So for me, I think the goal of cold outreach, assuming that you've prospected well, you have a good list of target customers, and you know exactly which stakeholders you're choosing to go after. Ultimately, it's connecting your product with logical buyers, you know, that may or may not know that it exists, and they may or may not know that it can solve challenges that they're facing with their business. So it's also, you know, it's important to supplement any inbound inquiries or, you know, inbound leads that you're receiving, referrals that you might be getting through your network, as well as any marketing initiatives. So the goal really is to make those connections with the right people, educate them around your product and its market fit, and develop pipeline, which through process should lead to revenue and close deals. So first and foremost, the goal is to connect and generate interest and pipeline. Secondly, you know, not everybody has large marketing budgets, and it really is a channel to support that marketing, support any initiatives you're doing. You know, I sort of think about it as individual, you know, like you take ownership of tailored marketing. So you're picking what message to send to what person at what time. And that can be, you know, those marketing efforts can basically be borne by all of your reps. I think it also sets you up for future success, because you think about your company as it begins to scale, the sales team probably gets built out, and then there might be new territories and new verticals that spring up. So it's incredibly important to set the right foundation when your business is, you know, at a stage that is manageable. And then as you continue to expand, you've ingrained that outbound mentality where you got to work hard and find the right customers and sort of earn that business yourself, which is really, really important. You know, as companies begin to scale, they're not just relying on any inbound inquiries that come in. And then fourthly, there we've sort of got that, you know, the option to do nothing is not necessarily going to lead to customers. They don't know, customers don't know what they don't know, and it's your opportunity to engage and educate them around your product and ways that it can be helping their day-to-day and their business. I like this quote. Yeah, I mean, cold calling, I don't like to say it, but it's sort of the necessary evil. It's something that is happening in the world around us every single day. And a lot of the best businesses this is one of their main pillars of success. A company like Salesforce, for example, their outbound, their business development teams are, in probably the tens of thousands. So it's everywhere. I like to think, you don't put all your eggs in the one basket of outbound, just phone calls. There's a lot of other outreach channels, and we'll get to them later on. Things like emails, things like LinkedIn messages, social selling, physical mail drops, and referrals and things like that. So first things first, why do people have that hesitation? I'll tell you now, it's perfectly natural. Everybody feels it. I've felt it many times in my career. And I think it is because you have to make that effort and you stand the possibility of being rejected. And I think, that mentality, as soon as you don't necessarily take rejection personally, which you can't necessarily do in this particular sort of avenue. But I think once you don't take rejection personally, like every no gets you closer to a yes. I also think it's incredibly important to focus on the micro wins. So that might not, you might not make a phone call that leads to a sale that day. That's probably unlikely. But you make a phone call, somebody tells you, call me back next week on Monday and I'll, we can get into it then. Or they say, thanks for calling, I'm not the right person. Why don't you reach out to this person in this department? And every set of that is a micro step. You have, you might conduct a web demo or an in-person visit or a product demonstration. And that then educates them further. And then, it all is about taking micro steps, which get you closer to that sale. So I think that is one of the pillars of succeeding in this is seeing the micro wins and not necessarily focusing on the failures. I also think, the focus on what the outcome of, like what the intention of that piece of activity is and what a positive outcome is. Again, it's not always immediate revenue, but it is developing that account, it's developing that relationship, and ultimately getting you close towards onboarding a customer. So cold outreach channels, there's a lot of them, if I'm honest. I think a lot of people are very quick to think cold calling is sort of the be all and end all, and take you back to the 1990s, the 2000s. Cold calling probably was the way that a lot of business was being conducted. But I think in this day and age, everybody is connected, everybody's on social media, everybody's constantly got access to emails on their phone. So the days of somebody having a desk phone that you'd ring during office hours, or emailing, and they only had a physical computer that sat on their desk at their office. Times have changed now, and I think sales and business development has obviously adjusted with that. So obviously, channel number one, as we'd mentioned at the top of the session, is cold calling, leaving voicemails, that kind of avenue. And I think it's interesting now that everybody typically has their phone on them at all times, and most people's mobile phones are their work phones. There's positives and negatives to that. The pro is you should be able to catch that person at any time, and assume that they have their phone on them. The con obviously is you can catch somebody at any time, and you might call them at 6:30 on a Thursday night and they're picking their kids up from school, and that immediately rubs them up the wrong way, and they might block your number, or they might tell you to never call them again. So you've obviously got to be clever about each of these channels. But the pro is instant connection, and you can build that rapport straight away. Emailing is something that I quite like as a channel. At least you could send an email, you send another email. Then when you call them, you sort of you can highlight, I've sent you a couple of emails, I'm now following up on that with a phone call. Emailing is good because it doesn't immediately require a response, so it can sort of sit there in their inbox. They're between meetings, they go through and clear out their unread emails, and they see that, and that might catch their attention at a time when, is best to engage with them. LinkedIn direct messages is another avenue that I quite like. Almost everybody is on LinkedIn these days. LinkedIn has an app on your phone, so people are connected constantly. And LinkedIn direct messages for me is almost it's almost like the texting of the corporate world. It's a way where you can be a little less formal. It's more of just, it's almost trading back and forth, you're messaging in real time. It also shows when messages are read typically. So people sometimes feel more like the need to respond because they know that you've seen their message. Social platform engagement, what we sort of call social selling. I think that's an incredibly important channel as well. And that's, getting your presence out, connecting with the right people, sharing useful content, engaging with useful content. And that just helps with sort of the marketing aspect. There's also some sort of less popular or more old school methods. So physical mail and pamphlet drops. We've experienced that with some competitors, here and in New York. That's a channel that a lot of people send, magazines and pamphlets to the offices of their prospects. Text messages is another angle, and that can be a little bit controversial if you haven't sort of earned that relationship yet. And networking events is something else, marketing events, going to mixers, things like that, ways that you can get in front of potential customers. So there's a lot of different channels. There's good and bad to each channel. I think the absolute best approach is a hybrid combination of a few and getting in front of people in different but creative ways. So top 4 mistakes. I think, I've made my fair share of mistakes in my outbound sales career. But I think, here we've got some mistakes and, ways that you can think around getting past that. So first contact, I think this is important because you're representing your business and you are, you're like engaging, and you're going to be that first touch point for that company engaging with your business. So, you do want to make that first impression count. You want to do research and show that you know about their business, the industry they're in, some of the products that they're involved with, potential challenges they're facing or peers, competitors in that industry that you might be working with. So you want to show there is a specific reason that you're reaching out to their company and them specifically. So I think that's important. In saying that, do your research, but don't do too much research, because a lot of what you can do, you can be reading the website, you can be going through LinkedIn posts, you can be, looking at a company 10K or the financial statement, and then you ring them and they don't answer, and you kind of move to the next on your call list, but you've spent half an hour and haven't necessarily made any contact. So there is a fine line between not doing any research and it comes off like it is just, you've blasted 1,000 people with the same email, but you don't want to do spend too much time preparing and not make a connection and sort of have to go back to square one the next time you reach out to them. So that's a fine line. I think another really important note here is wasting a no. Most of the time you get a no from a prospect. It's not necessarily a no, it's just a not now. It's, this isn't the right time for me to be engaged with your product. It's not the right time for, our business. We're not facing that challenge. We might have, a competitor, a competitor product that, might be under contract and that expires, and let's revisit this at the right time. So taking what appears to be a no and trying to get something out of it, finding out what the reason for the no is, finding out who the appropriate contact is, when is the right time to re-engage. Often you want to continue to demonstrate value, even if it isn't the right time. So things like sharing interesting news articles or giving updates around the products that are being developed, or, new customers you've onboarded and the use cases and value propositions are relevant to that particular customer. So unpacking a no and having the opportunity to dig a bit deeper, that's particularly valuable, I think, on phone calls. When you hear no and you say, oh, why is that? What are you looking to achieve? Is there a reason that you don't expect that this is going to be something that, can have an impact on your business? The same with an email, pushing back on that no, challenging the prospect to say, there's significant benefit here that you might not be recognizing. And then I think the final mistake you make is just valuing sort of just the level of activity over the quality of your activity. So I think this is where I'll discuss briefly sort of key performance indicators. And, I've had companies I've worked for in my career where they might not necessarily be looking at the most valuable metrics. So they might be seeing, you've made 100 calls today, yet the person next to you's only made 15, but you have only made, 15 connections. They've made 10 valuable connections. Their talk time far exceeds yours. Their pipeline generation far exceeds yours. So you want to be really strategic around what metrics determine success. And it is, there's a lot of different schools of thought. There's different sort of leading indicators for different businesses. But I think being strategic about what you're incentivizing your sales team, like what determines their success, and making sure that you do value quality and connection over the sheer number of dials or emails sent. How to level up your cold reach from not bad to wow. I think first and foremost, we've got here leveraging insights is do that research. Make sure you know their business. Make sure you're understanding the challenges that they're facing and understanding how customers in a similar position have solved those challenges with your product. I think timing is another really, really important component. So there are, when you think about making phone calls or sending emails, there's a lot of different research and data out there around when the right time to call somebody is, what the right cadence for follow-up is. Some people think that the best time for a cold email is, before work or after work, because they're not engaged in meetings. They might, have a minute to read an email on their phone. Other people like to think, you can always call somebody on their work phone between 12 and 1 because they won't have booked a meeting. They're most likely eating a sandwich at their desk. Mondays and Wednesdays, typically the best days to send a cold email because it's when people are sort of by the computer and looking to get through their to-do list, to get through their flagged emails. On call timing as opposed to email, I think the highest likelihood is typically between 10 and 11 a.m. For people to receive a phone call because they're at their desk, they're working away. And then sort of from a following up cadence. So when thinking about how often, you send an email, you make a phone call, there's no answer, you leave a voicemail, you follow up again, should it be 3 days? Should it be 10 days? Should it be a month? There's a lot of research. I'm not going to tell you that it's an exact science by any means. But I think, there's schools of thought that say you should always leave it a week between touch points, long enough that they remember you, short enough that they remember you, but long enough that, it's not sort of you following up 2 days after. A lot of people have found from cold calling perspectives, you call, leave an email, leave a voicemail, you call, no answer, call, no answer. On the 6th time, that's typically the highest success rate for you to connect with that prospect. And there's also a lot of different research around the number of, different channel activations you can use. So emails, you call, then you leave an email, send an email, then you move through LinkedIn and connections. And, that's how you typically move through, depending on what your standard sales cycle is. There's a lot of different avenues. In my personal perspective, my cadence is typically send an email, no response. A week later, send an email again, bumping this up. Have you got a minute to connect? And then the third time around is to make a phone call. And then, phone call with a voicemail, leaving you a message, by then it's typically time to try and multi-thread that account. So it's reaching out to somebody else who might be on their team or their corresponding role type, but in a different office or located in a different country or whatever it may be, and sort of move through the stakeholder map and the different, key decision makers based on your particular product, and then circling back. And there's even a cheeky, there was one guy at my previous company who, after the fourth missed connection, he used to just send what we called a phantom calendar invite. So you'd send that to your prospect. It wouldn't come through as an email. It would come through as an actual calendar invite. And he would select a time, but he'd say, feel free to adjust based on, your schedule. And he had some success with that. Obviously didn't have success all the time, but that's another creative approach of, finding time to get into people's calendars and make that connection, and trying to stand out from the many other sort of business development reps that are most likely also engaging with that customer. Another thing we have on there is keeping notes. I think this is incredibly important again as you scale. One thing WeWork is really values is the sort of Salesforce hygiene and keeping your notes in the system, making sure that, suppose you move on from the company or that you hand on that account to a different rep, they know who you spoke to at what date, what the conversation was about, what the follow-up steps were. There's a lot of tools out there like SalesSoft that log emails you've sent to particular contacts, and all of that lives on the account page, or all of those notes are a shared resource amongst everybody within the company, because that really helps. If you come and take over somebody's book of business or their account list, the history of that account. What you spoke about last time you were on the phone with them. And that just allows you to be professional and to be really pointed about, the conversations that you're having. We've got a few helpful resources here. There's a huge amount of, resources in the sales world, and some really interesting thought leaders that I follow on LinkedIn, like Matt Dixon and Daniel Disney, that they're always posting interesting content, new approaches to selling, a lot of different research around touch points and avenues of activations and things like that. The first one I thought I'd highlight here is spin selling. And this is something that in my previous role in New York selling market research, this was something that we really valued, and every new hire had to read. So it's sort of a sales methodology or an approach to sales that you start by sort of identifying the situation and the problem. There's implication questions, so what is the implication of if you choose to do nothing here, or like, where will your business be if you don't address XYZ shortcoming, and then need payoff. And it's really where you question the prospect in a way where they start selling themselves on the product, or they start saying, oh, wow, if I had this market research, that would save me 6 hours on every new project or every new acquisition that we look to. So that's something that it's really interesting as a way to, develop the sale and as a way to win over that stakeholder. The next one is The Challenger Sale, another really good book. And this is Matt Dixon, who I mentioned just before. It is about challenging your prospect and pushing them on the benefits of what your product can do for their business, and maybe the disadvantages of them choosing to not address that particular challenge they're facing, or that that shortcoming of their business. And then we've got Daniel Pink's To Sell Is Human. It's just looks at sort of the underlying social selling and science of selling aspects. So a lot of interesting insights and things in there. I mean, as I mentioned before, the resource pool is absolutely endless, and there's a lot of interesting and often conflicting content out there. But I recommend that you get in there, have a read for yourself, see what resonates, use a few of these different approaches, see what you have success with. Obviously, it's always worth sharing things that have worked for you and learning what's working for others, and constantly evolving your approach. But I think it's it's a very interesting time to be in the world of outbound sales and cold connections. And it's something that, you know, you really feel like I'm at the point now where you feel that sense of gratification, you feel that enjoyment when you make a meaningful connection and you demonstrate value and you win over a prospect and often get the feedback that, you know, this is really valuable. I'm really glad that you reached out to me and taught me about this.
Awesome. And I would also say there's a lot of tools and more coming online like every month, it feels like, to give your prospective clients the quickest way to book into your calendar directly.
Yeah.
So to make it as frictionless and, you know, empower your prospects to jump into your calendar without having to actually pick up the phone or go back and forth with multiple emails. That's a positive way to use automation. So we are just at the top of the hour, and thank you so much for making time. I know you're incredibly busy, especially with Sydney just opening back up, and it's starting to get real exciting in a positive way here in Australia post-lockdown, and hopefully across many of other regions that are joining us. And thank you so much for everyone who joined us for this session and your great questions and comments. And I will remind everyone that we do have our mini mastermind session tomorrow afternoon, same time and place. And it'd be great to see some of you guys there to discuss some of these, some of the things we talked about, and we can go a little bit deeper and more personalized into implementation as in breakout groups. Because the whole point of this is to actually put it into practice in your roles and businesses so you can really see outcomes from it. And coming up, our next two sessions next week are conducting successful discovery calls. So that will be super helpful and is also run by one of our own. Vincent will be doing that one. And then we also have one that I'm particularly excited about, my background being a little bit more on the marketing side of things, strategic influence and effective storytelling. So once you've earned that prospect's interest, making a really compelling story about why your company exists and why you do what you do ultimately comes down to storytelling. And that's the core of brand and brand reinforcement. So that's going to be a really awesome session. So those are both up next week. So thank you so much. And we'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Ren.
Thanks, Ed. Bye, guys.